Section 4 of Joseph in the Snow and the Clockmaker, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rita Boutros. Joseph in the Snow and the Clockmaker, Volume 1, by Berthold Auerbach, translated by Grace Jane Wallace. Chapter 4. Martina's Return Home. On the Saturday afternoon of a midsummer's day, a woman was crouching behind a rock, overhanging that part of the stream where there is a black whirlpool. The seamstress Legard chanced to be passing by on her way home from the forest mill, wishing to see the spot where she once lost her way. Legard is full of superstition, though no one says more against it than she does. When on that Saturday she arrived at the rock and saw the figure cowering down behind it, she gave a loud scream. What can that be, crouching in the bright light like a spectre? It is Martina! She rose, and looking piteously at Legard, told her that she had intended to drown herself, but that she must live for her child's sake. But when it was born, she resolved to die. Legard quickly promised to be godmother, for the belief hereabouts is that a child for whom a godmother is promised before its birth comes happily into the world, and even if it dies, it is sure to be happy. Legard never ceased talking to Martina and striving to console her, till at last she persuaded her to go with her to the village. This took place in the afternoon. I was sitting with my husband in the garden, when suddenly we heard from the opposite side of the river a shrill scream of agony that seemed to pierce our ears. And scarcely had we hurried out of the arbor than Legard rushed up to us as pale as death, and said, "Herr Pastor, for God's sake, lose not a moment in going to Schilder David's, for he will murder Martina, I fear." I wished to go with my husband, but he told me to stay where I was, and went himself as quickly as possible. Legard nearly swooned away, but luckily there was still a cup of coffee to spare, and when it had revived her, she told me that Martina had come home in shame and disgrace. When David, who was cutting wood before his door, saw her and heard the sad truth, he raised his axe with the intention of splitting his daughter's skull. The neighbors, however, rushed up to him in time to snatch the axe from him, but he was still standing on the threshold of his door, threatening to strangle Martina if she attempted to come under his roof. Martina fell down on the doorstep. Some women carried her into the house, and when she revived and saw her confirmation certificate hanging on the wall of the room, framed under glass, she uttered such a loud, piercing scream that we had heard it even at this distance, and she again relapsed into a dead faint. At last she was restored, but David called out, "Don't bring her to life again, for out she shall go as soon as she can move. O Lord, strike me blind, accursed be my eyes. America deprived me of my other children, and now. He made a rush at Martina. The neighbors, however, held him back, and Legard hurried away to call my husband. We waited long before my husband came back. He brought David with him, supporting him on his arm, for David was groping like a blind man. He had pressed down his hat over his eyes, and kept saying, "Herr Pastor, shut me up, do, for I am no longer master of myself. My child, my best, my only child. She was a crown to me, as her confirmation said, and now. O Heavenly Father, why is it thy will thus to try me? It was not to be. I was not to reach the grave without this severe burden. O Herr Pastor, to see a child even enjoy its food seems more pleasant than to do so yourself. Oh, how long do we tend our little child and care for it? and rejoice in its health and strength, and hearing it say good and pleasant words, and glad when it comes from school and has learnt something useful, glad when it gathers wood, and sings and is merry. And then comes a man and lays waste all this happiness. My other children live, but they are emigrants, and are no good to me. My Martina stayed at home. She is still before my eyes, but is worse than dead. When a child is virtuous, we are doubly happy, but a wicked child can make a father not only doubly, but 1,000-fold miserable. I keep racking my brain, and I cannot find out where my fault has been, and yet I must be to blame. And now my good name—" Here he saw me, and almost sinking down, he exclaimed with a burst of convulsive sobs, "Frau Pastorin, you always loved her well. She has given me my death blow. I feel it." He could evidently scarcely sustain himself. We brought him into the house, and there he remained nearly unconscious for more than an hour. He covered his face with his hands, and large tears were seen trickling down through his fingers. At last he rose, and standing erect by a strong effort, he said, "May God reward you, Herr Pastor. Here is my hand. May I die an evil death if I harm my Martina." Here he was interrupted by his tears, which flowed afresh at this name. "If my Martina suffers through me, either by word or deed, God has punished me through her. I must indeed be a miserable sinner. I was too proud of my children, and more especially of her, and she is now wretched enough. I will sin against fatherly love no more." My husband wished to go home with him, but he firmly declined this. I must learn to pass along the street alone with this stain of shame. I have been too proud. My head is bowed down till the hour when I descend into the grave. 1,000 thanks, Herr Pastor. May God reward you." The man, whose gait had been hitherto so proud and erect, now crept home a miserable object. When he was gone, my husband related to me the frightful scene he had witnessed. Those present, however, told me afterwards that my husband had shown the most unexampled patience and gentleness towards David, who was in a state of raging fury, exclaiming frantically, "I am like Job! O God, strike me dumb, in order that I may no longer curse myself and the whole world. But there is no justice, none in heaven and none on earth." My husband at length succeeded in pacifying him, but when David was at last gone, I never saw my husband so worn out and exhausted as on that occasion. Legart kept her promise, and was godmother to little Joseph, and his father, Adam Rotman, was also present at his baptism. Adam had a fine life of it at home, for daring to go to the village, and from that time he was watched, and imprisoned like a malefactor, the old Rotmanin having complaisant spies everywhere in her pay, for she does not grudge money for her own purposes. Childer David had always been a regular church-goer, but after the unwished-for birth of his grandson, he was 2 months without going to church. When he heard the bells ringing for divine service, he never failed to lament afresh over his dishonor, which prevented him being able to go to church. But when no one was looking, he liked to carry his grandchild about the room. The boy seemed to have won all his love. He had the child constantly in his arms, and watched over him like a mother. On Sundays and holidays he was to be seen for hours beside the garden hedge yonder, grandfather and grandson passing into the fields, and standing watching the waterfall. Indeed, the old man gave up smoking to please the child, whereas formerly he never moved without a pipe in his mouth. and when the boy could run alone, he was his constant companion, and used to lead him by the hand. If the boy is playing with other children, and sees his grandfather, he runs away from all his games, and cannot be prevailed on to leave his grandfather's side. Indeed, if a child could be so easily spoilt, David would have ruined his grandson by his vanity, for his only pleasure in life is hearing praise of the boy. He is constantly repeating all the wise sayings of little Joseph, and boasting of how cleverly the boy can talk. Although David is very conscientious, still he is not at all aware how many things he invents for the child which he never uttered. And then he usually winds up by saying, "Wait till the boy is 20 years older, and then the whole country will talk of my Joseph and all he knows." I lately heard an instance of the strange ideas of this singular boy. On the same day a child died in this neighborhood, and one was born, and little Joseph said, "Grandfather, isn't it true that when we are born we fall asleep in heaven and awake on earth, and when we die we fall asleep on earth and awake in heaven?" Little Joseph is also generally present when his grandfather is talking with his neighbors, so in this way he hears of all the various events and quarrels in the village, and knows all its secret history. "Why do you say nothing of Martina?" interrupted Edward. "There is very little to relate about her. She lives a quiet but busy life, ready to lend her aid to any family in sorrow or in need. She talks very little, and is devoted with the most tender love to her father, and he repays her by the love he shows towards little Joseph." "And the father of the boy, Adam, what of him?" "He also lives very retired, and, as I told you, he is almost kept a prisoner at home by his parents. He makes no resistance, and seems to think he has made all the reparation in his power by uniformly declaring that, if he is not allowed to marry Martina, he will never marry at all. The parents anxiously strive to induce Martina to give him up. Very tempting offers have been made to her, and very respectable wooers have come forward, whom old Rotman has offered to provide with a good sum of money. But she will not for a moment listen to such proposals, and her invariable answer is, 'I could easily get a good husband, but my Joseph can get no other father than Adam, even if he wished it.' A cousin of Martina's, a shoemaker, who is very well off, and a bachelor, appears resolved not to marry until he is quite sure that Martina will not have him. He is called in the village Haspel, and indeed I do not know his real name. On festival nights he helps the girls to wind off the yarn that they have spun on hasps, and therefore he has got the nickname of Haspel. He is a good-natured creature, and every year consecutively plays the part of the carnival Merry Andrew. Wherever he goes, the whole year through, people expect him to play the buffoon, which he is quite willing to do. His appearance and manners are so droll that it is scarcely possible to know when he is in jest or when in earnest, particularly as he has a very red nose, which looks just as if it was painted. He is sincerely attached to Martina, who has also a great regard for him, but only the kind of liking that all the other girls in the village have. She will never marry him. Indeed, no one thinks that anyone would marry Haspel." "God be praised," said the pastorin, breaking off her story. "My husband must be by this time under shelter of the Rotman's roof, if no accident has occurred, and God forbid there should. It would be the most precious Christmas boon to me, the most cheering commemoration of this holy season, If my husband could soften the Rotmannen's hard heart, her husband, Speidel Rotman, would soon come round then. In that case I think there is little doubt that we should remain here, and gladly too. For it was the sad story of Martina and Adam which at last turned the scale, and made my husband resolved to quit this parish. These hard-hearted Rotmanner are never at rest, and have at last contrived that everything should be prepared to-morrow for the betrothal of Adam with Tony, the daughter of the forest miller. She lately had a young stepmother placed over her, and is resolved to leave home, no matter whither. She is the only girl of respectable family who would accept Adam. The forest miller and Rotman, these two families, are the most highly respected, or what is the same thing nearly, the richest in the whole district. I must say that, for my part, I could not bear to see Adam go to church with the forest miller's Tony. It is hard on my husband to stand in his pulpit, and to pour out his inmost heart before his congregation, and to preach faith and piety and goodness, and to know that there are people sitting even in the best pews in the church, whom he can't help seeing, and to whom all he says appears but empty words. Listen, the watchman is calling 12. Otto is certainly arrived by this time, and I feel sure he will do good. Come, let us go to rest also. End of Section 4.